They didn't call it the soul, at least not the way we do. To the ancients of Kemet, what we now call Egypt, the essence of a person was not one thing, but many. Layers, forces, fragments of eternity bound in flesh. They spoke of Ka, Ba, Ak, not as metaphors, but as truths more real than bone. Ka, the vital spark. Ba, the unique personality that could travel between worlds. Ak, the transfigured spirit that survived judgment and merged with the stars. Today, we call the soul a mystery, a vague glow inside us. But to them, it was a map, a system, a science, not superstition, but sophistication. Their temples weren't just for worship, they were laboratories for transformation. Every symbol, every ritual, designed to align the seen with the unseen. And somehow, we forgot. We traded soul for self-image, essence for ego. They were building eternity. We're just building profiles. The Egyptians didn't just believe we had a soul, they believed we were a soul, wearing flesh like a temporary robe. And they didn't stop at naming it. They studied it. They mapped it. They knew that what we call self is a shifting illusion, stitched together by memory and desire. That's why they practiced weighing the heart, not the brain, after death. The heart to them was the seat of truth. If it was light, you rose. If heavy, you fell. Their Book of the Dead wasn't about fear, it was preparation. A guide to navigate the afterlife, not in terror, but with clarity. While we fear death as a black void, they saw it as a journey with checkpoints, trials, and transformations. To live rightly was to die wisely. To die wisely was to ascend. Today, we stuff our fear of death into distractions, noise, and denial. We mask it with wellness trends and productivity hacks. But the soul, it still waits, beneath the noise, behind the name. It remembers the silence it once knew. To the ancients, the soul wasn't a ghostly essence. It was architecture, a divine design. The Ka needed sustenance, the Ba needed freedom, the Ak required purification. Each aspect had needs, roles, and paths. That's why mummification mattered. It wasn't just preservation of the body, but a way to assist the soul's reunion with eternity. The tombs weren't graves, they were launch pads. Every wall etched with symbols, every item placed with intention to guide the soul beyond forgetting. They understood that memory is sacred, that forgetting oneself is the first death. So they inscribed spells not to manipulate fate, but to remind the soul of its own name. In our world, names are just labels, but to them, the true name held power. To forget it was to lose your place in the cosmic order. Today, we know data, not meaning. We measure success, not alignment. The Egyptians measured harmony, with the stars, with the spirit, with Ma'at, the principle of cosmic balance, and they knew imbalance begins within. If you felt more than you can explain, subscribe and ring the bell. Some truths don't speak, they wait to be remembered. They believed that to live was to rehearse dying, not in fear, but in reverence. The rituals of Egypt, silent, precise, symbolic, were rehearsals for the soul's next chapter. Every gesture, every chant, was a thread in the soul's return to its source. They didn't see the body as an enemy of spirit. They saw it as a temple, temporary, yes, but sacred, a place where heaven and earth momentarily touched. The body was the stage, but the soul was the story. And to forget that story meant wandering lost, in life or after. That's why the ancients trained themselves to remember, through dreams, through fasting, through stillness. In a world that rushes to forget, they practiced remembering. Today we live as if time is something to outrun. We fill our days to silence the ache. But the ache is not the problem, it's the invitation. The soul doesn't shout, it whispers. And only in stillness do we hear what it's saying, that we were never meant to escape death, but to understand it, and in doing so, finally remember ourselves. In Egypt, Death wasn't the end. It was a transition, a passage from one density of being to another. The soul was not judged by a god seated on a throne, but by the weight of its own heart. Ma'at, the principle of truth and balance, was not a deity to worship, but a force to embody. The soul had to match its frequency, or fall into fragmentation. That's why their art showed scales, not swords, harmony, not punishment. Their sacred texts whispered that the true enemy was forgetfulness, forgetting one's origin, one's mission, one's name. And so, life itself was a ceremony, a slow remembering, a process of purification, of stripping away what is not eternal. Today, we fear judgment, but the ancients feared only one thing: being unprepared. They didn't crave heaven, they cultivated it, within. Because when the heart is light, the soul soars, and when it is heavy, not even gods can lift it. They knew liberation is not reward, it's resonance, and only those in tune with truth truly continue. The ancients knew that soul and cosmos mirrored each other. What happened within echoed in the stars, and what moved in the sky stirred something deep within the soul. Astrology to them wasn't prediction, it was reflection. A way to align with cosmic rhythms, so the inner and outer worlds danced as one. This was not superstition, but deep symmetry. The temples of Egypt were built in alignment with constellations, not to worship the heavens, but to mirror them. Because they believed, when the soul forgets its place in the cosmos, suffering begins. Disconnection is the wound, remembering is the healing. They mapped the heavens not for curiosity, but for return, for integration. And in this return, the soul becomes whole again. Today, we live in fragments. Our attention is split. Our identities are layered in performance. We scroll for meaning and swipe past silence. But the soul does not respond to speed. It opens slowly, like a flower at dusk. It requires rhythm. It craves alignment. And it remembers what we've tried so hard to forget. The soul was not something they spoke of lightly. It was sacred architecture, alive with memory and motion. They saw the soul not as personal property, but as a thread in a larger weave, a piece of the divine longing to know itself. That's why solitude was not loneliness to them. It was communion. Silence was not absence. It was presence intensified. The rituals were not about spectacle, but resonance. They weren't seeking miracles. They were becoming them. Through every act of stillness, the soul ripened. It learned to listen beneath sound, to feel beyond sensation. They knew the divine couldn't be summoned. It had to be remembered. And remembrance was an art, a discipline, a path of humility. Today we chase experience. They practice depth. We consume knowledge. They embodied it. The soul to them was not a concept to debate, but a reality to live. And in that living, death was not feared. Because how can you fear something that your soul has rehearsed 1,000 times? We look back at ancient Egypt and see sand, stone, and myth. But they left behind more than monuments. They left messages, coded in symbols, etched in silence. Not to be worshipped, but to be remembered. Their temples still whisper, if you know how to listen. Their wisdom lives not in texts, but in resonance, in how a single word can wake something forgotten in you. The ancients didn't speak of enlightenment as escape. They saw it as return, a homecoming, a reuniting of soul with source. That's why they feared forgetfulness more than death. Because to forget who you are is to die while still breathing. But even in forgetting, there is hope. Because the soul is patient, it waits. Beneath distraction, beneath identity, beneath fear, it waits for stillness. And when you are finally quiet enough to hear it, you don't find answers. You find recognition. Not something new, something ancient, something you've always known. The map was never lost. You were just never told where to look. What if the soul isn't waiting to be saved, but waiting for you to remember it was never lost?